I need brains. This isn't brains. Today I'm going to be doing a review of The Greatest Lover in All England by Christina Dodd. I believe I mentioned in one of my previous videos that I chose this book because of the cover, and I mean, just that is a romance novel cover. Yeah. It's probably one of the best things about the book, and we'll get into that. So several years ago, I bought a ton of books by Christina Dodd. I had read a couple of hers and I really enjoyed her, so I decided to buy whatever I could get a hold of. And I saw this one. And I actually saw this one with a different cover, and the story didn't really sound that interesting, so I was like, oh, whatever. But then I saw it again with this cover, and the text on the back was slightly different. And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And oh my goodness, I should have just listened to my first instincts, because this book has a lot of problems. But this cover, I mean, just it's Fabio, basically. It's wonderful. So before I talk about what I liked and didn't like about this book, let's go over kind of the synopsis of it. This book actually takes place in the Elizabethan era. So it takes place in 1601, which is only a couple years before the end of Queen Elizabeth I's reign. So it basically deals with an acting troupe and some political intrigue and kind of some romance. There is romance in this. It is a romance novel, and it is the weakest part of it, but we'll go over that. So it starts out with a guy named Sir Danny Plimpton and a kid, or not kid, but a young man named Rosencrantz running through the streets, and they're about to be captured by these men because Sir Danny overheard a plot to overthrow the queen, and wants to tell her, but he's kind of loud about his wanting to tell her, and so they're like, well, we're gonna capture you and kill you, so you can't do that. So he and Rosencrantz are on the run, and they manage to get saved, and they hide out in the Globe Theater. And of course, at this time, if you know anything about that era, that's where William Shakespeare was, and that's where he performed he put on a lot of his plays. And Rosencrantz calls him Uncle Will. And so they don't say he's William Shakespeare until a little bit later in the book, but it's like, this is so obvious. I actually kind of wish they just didn't say he's William Shakespeare, just because, I don't know, it seemed a little ham-fisted to begin with, and it was even more ham-fisted, like, oh, it's William Shakespeare, if you didn't notice in the first place, that's who it is. And so they get a little bit of help from him to get out of town, and their whole plan is to go to this estate of basically the master of the Queen's Guard, and blackmail him to get money. And so Rosencrantz is actually a girl. Her name is Rosalind, and they call her Rosie, regardless of whether she's pretending to be a boy or not. She has basically been raised as a boy since she was like 4 or 5 years old. Sir Danny found her in a carriage that had basically been driven off the road, and everyone had died from the plague. Everyone was really sick. She was also sick, but Sir Danny took care of her, and she got better, but she doesn't really remember a whole lot because she was young and she was really sick. And, he's an actor, and so he's like, well, trying to take care of a female child is a pain, so you're just gonna pretend to be a boy. And she knows she's a girl, but she's had to pretend to be a boy all of her life. And she basically will often play the female roles in the plays, because back in this time period, women were not allowed to be in plays. All of the women's roles were played by men. And so it's like, well, he's a feminine looking man, let's give him a lot of the female parts. And it really reminded me a lot of Victor Victoria, which is a great old Julie Andrews movie. It's probably based on something else. I don't remember. That movie was great, and I was so hoping they were going to do basically a Victor Victoria thing in here, and they just completely wasted that opportunity, and I was so sad. So anyway, Rosalind, it turns out, is the secret heir to this estate that they're going to. So they're going to blackmail the guy who owns it and say, yeah, she's the secret heir, so you either got to give us money or we're going to claim it or whatever. And Rosalind doesn't really believe this of Danny, but when she gets there, she starts to kind of have some memories, and she knows some things that she shouldn't know otherwise, and figures out, oh, I guess I am the heir. But anyway, that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. So they go to this estate, and the guy whose estate it is his name is Sir Anthony Rycliffe, and he's the hero. He's the male lead of this story, and he's essentially the captain of the Queen's Guard or something. He's one of Queen Elizabeth's favorites. He's actually a bastard, and so he's had to deal with that all his life, but the Queen likes him, so she gave him his own estate. And because the estate had been abandoned, they knew that the Lord had died and that the daughter was presumably dead. They looked for her for a long time, but eventually it's like, all right, we just gotta move on, give this estate away. And so Sir Anthony was given this estate, and he is currently in search of a wife. And so he's invited a lot of eligible ladies and all that to his estate, but he's getting kind of annoyed. He's like, I just want to, peruse the selection. I don't really want to commit just yet. And then his sisters tell him, oh, there's this really powerful lady who really wants to marry you. And he doesn't really want to marry her. It's not that he doesn't like her, but she's older than him, and he doesn't want an older wife. And she's also very strong-willed. She'd overpower him, basically. And so he's looking around like, all right, I have to attach myself to one of these ladies and just pretend to be into her for a while until this party's over and I can just try this again later. And he sees this woman with red hair, and he's like, oh, she's in a wig or whatever. And he goes over to her and is like, oh, you're so lovely. I'm going to make out with you. Just automatically he makes out with her. And it turns out it's Rosalind, because they've arrived at, with the theater troupe that are supposed to put on plays and stuff. And he kisses her and he feels her boobs. So he knows she's a woman. And then, goes off later. It's like, oh, I'll see you later, my darling. And of course, Rosalind's like, oh my gosh, I just got kissed. But I like it. And then later, Sir Anthony is seeing the play, and he goes, oh my god, that's the person I kissed. Oh my gosh, I kissed a man. Wait a second. No, the man had boobs, so that's a chick. And this is where I got really this is where the story got really annoying for me, because it had so much potential. And then, they kind of solved the issue. It would have been great if he kept going, oh my gosh, did I kiss a dude? Because for one, I can't marry a dude. Also, I don't like dudes. And, being torn or whatever. No, he knows it's a chick. So, there wasn't really a whole lot of tension there. And honestly, you don't really care if people find out that Rosalind's a woman or not. There's not really that much tension involved in that. And so, pretty soon after that, Sir Danny and Rosalind go to Sir Anthony, and they show him a letter that basically says that Rosalind is the heir. It's not stamped or signed or anything, but Sir Anthony still kind of thinks it might be true. And he's like, well, crap. I was like, well, why not? I'll just marry her. That'll solve the problem. And Rosalind's like, well, I don't want to marry you. If I'm the actual heir, I'm just going to take the estate. I'll go to the Queen. And then oh God, there's barely a romance in here. He just kind of just likes her. And then she eventually just kind of is tired of him pursuing her and just gives in. That's the whole romance, basically. He has his sisters start to basically prep her to be taken in front of the queen because she's been raised as an actor her whole life. She doesn't know any of the court stuff. That also comes to naught. She kind of meets the queen, but in a capacity as an actor, so it doesn't matter at all her training. So many things wrong with this book. So Sir Danny has to leave the estate to try to warn the queen that these lords are trying to rise up against her. And leaving Rosalind at the estate with Sir Anthony and his sisters and another lady. And he says, you know, I know you want to marry her, but you got to be a perfect gentleman while I'm gone. And guess what they do the same night that he leaves? They have sex. Like, Rosalind has still been trying to, like, not like this guy because, well, for one, she's never had feelings for a guy like this. She's always been raised as a guy. And she's only had a couple kisses with him. That's it. That's her only couple kisses her whole life. And then suddenly they're having sex. And I'm like, Anthony, you are not a hero in this instance. You're not like, ooh, you're a Knights of Romance hero. We like you. I'm like, no, you're kind of a dick. Like, you told her what is essentially her father that, yes, I will be a perfect gentleman. I will protect her. I won't do anything bad to her. And yeah, I'm going to have sex with her. And she has all these urges and doesn't, you know, want to stop, and he doesn't want to stop either, and he's supposed to be the mature one who knows better and doesn't know better. And oh my god, of course, at least he does insist that they get married the next morning, and Rosalind's not about that, so she kind of just puts him off for a little bit. And then they have sex again, and he's like, alright, we really have to get married in the morning, like, we're gonna do that. And Rosalind's kind of like, oh, fine, I might as well. That'll solve our problems. And then she finds a letter that he kind of has been keeping, not really hidden, but he hasn't been showing her these letters that says that Sir Danny is in Newgate Prison and is about to be executed soon because the men who are trying to rise up against the Queen put him in jail. And the Queen doesn't know anything. The Queen kind of just she goes off her own whim. She doesn't know or care about a lot of this stuff. And so instead of getting married to Sir Anthony, she leaves before they're supposed to get married and goes to London. And then the whole convoluted plot where they're trying to perform Hamlet, I believe it is. Yeah, Hamlet in front of the Queen. And Rosalind wants to play Ophelia because she's hoping she can play Ophelia really well and get, you know, and get a boon from the Queen, and so that she can have Sir Danny released. And of course, at this point, Sir Danny has already been released, and he's kind of a friend to the Queen now for reasons. And so they do perform the play. It goes fine. Of course, Sir Danny is, you know, he's already kind of released anyway. He's released, and the bad guys are found out and taken care of, and Sir Anthony and Rosalind get married, and it's all hunky-dory and whatever crap. I have so many thoughts about this stupid book, and yeah, let's rant for a little bit about this book. So this is supposed to be a romance novel, and the romance was the weakest part of this entire book. I actually enjoyed the subplots a lot more than I did the actual romance. So Anthony is supposed to, you know, it's kind of a fairly typical trope where I'm going to attach myself to this one chick. I don't know her, I don't like her, whatever, to avoid another chick. And that's pretty typical. But then he just loves her. He's like, oh, I'm going to make out with you and then stick close to your side in order to prevent this other chick from, you know, getting her claws in me and making me marry her. And then he just loves Rosalind. I mean, there's a couple of brief moments when it could have been funny, like, I kissed a man. Wait a second, no, I didn't. And he knows that marrying her will solve their problems, but he never at any point dislikes her. He just likes her in general. And so there's no tension there. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you like her. And then, God, Rosalind just gives in. There's no like, oh my gosh, you're my hero. You're amazing. I love you for all these reasons. No, she just gives in. She just is like, oh yeah, he's hot. He's the first guy who ever kissed me. Yeah, okay. I'll marry him. I do not care about these characters at all. I cared far more about the plot against the queen and what's happening with Sir Danny and all that versus anything that was happening with Rosalind and Anthony. There was absolutely just nothing there. So I think that this is because in Christina Dodd's early books, she had a horrible habit of showing her research so much. I noticed this a lot in Candle in the Window, Castles in the Air, probably even to some extent, Treasures of the Sun. I didn't even finish that book. That was like a Spanish-American thing in the 1700s in the US. I could not finish that book. But in every single one, she was showing her research, and this was no exception. This was set in the Elizabethan era, so it was in 1601, the height of William Shakespeare and all of that, and there was so much stuff that went on that became the focus of the book almost more than the romance. The romance was kind of an afterthought. It was kind of just a vehicle to show that this stuff was going on. So the main subplot that was very interesting was there were these two lords that were plotting to overthrow the queen. They were essentially plotting to get her away from bad advisors. Basically, take over her privy council and, tell her, basically, you're going to do what we want you to do or we're going to kill you. And so that was what they had planned. And this actually happened in real life. The Earl of Essex, I think he was an earl, had planned a rebellion and it went badly for him and he was executed. In the book, also the Earl of Southampton was involved, and he may have been involved in real life too. I looked it up on Wikipedia. It didn't say anything about Southampton, but Essex was involved. And so they showed a lot of that, and then they explained about some of the plays and what they, different connotations they had, because they wanted, Southampton was the patron of William Shakespeare and wanted him to put on Richard II, which is basically about overthrowing a monarch. And so they're like, oh, play that and get the people used to the idea of overthrowing a monarch. But they spent way too much time on that stuff, and it was interesting, but it wasn't interesting for a romance novel. And so she showed all of that, and just it wasn't as bad as Candle in the Window and Castle in the Air were much worse about kind of the day-to-day things, like what they wore and what they slept on and things like that. This was a little bit better about that, but this was really bad about showing all the research of stuff that went on during this time. And the reason it was bad was because it really hindered the story as a whole. They spent a lot of time with the queen near the end of the book, and a lot of stuff going on with her, and they spent time with Sir Danny, which, again, that stuff was interesting, just not a romance novel. And so all the stuff with Rosalind and Anthony felt kind of superfluous and just not that interesting. I feel like, I don't know if she wanted to write a historical romance or if she just wanted to write something set during this time period, or if she's like, I'm gonna write a historical romance novel, and ooh, look at all the stuff I learned, and ooh, this is far more interesting, so I'm gonna write that. It's almost like the romance was tacked on there. So yeah, it kind of, it just really bothered me. Also, Sir Danny and Rosalind and like his troupe and everything, they know William Shakespeare. They're friends with him. They see him regularly. She calls him Uncle Will. And it was so on the nose. Like, oh, they just know William Shakespeare. They couldn't even say, oh yeah, we're a troupe, but we're, one day we wish we could work with William Shakespeare, but we can't. We're just a lowly troupe or whatever. No, they just know him, and he's an ally of theirs. I honestly would have preferred it if they just kept calling him Uncle Will and never mentioned he was William Shakespeare at all, because we're not stupid. We know who this is. But, of course, she has to say, oh, it's William Shakespeare. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See what I did there? No. This book, not worth your time as a romance novel. It's not even, and it's not really even worth your time as a historical novel, because they spend time on the romance. They do. I mean, there is a good chunk in here that is the romance, but it's stupid. So I don't like it. Because they just like each other, and then that's it. They're not really working for it at all. The stupid plot gets in the way of their romance. That's not how it's supposed to work. The plot is supposed to make it more interesting. So mad at it. So yeah, the best part about this book was the cover. So if you can't tell by now, I do not recommend this. This book is bad. Very bad. It just is so confusing and so jumbled. Like, it's almost like she didn't really know which one she wanted to write more, romance or historical. And it wasn't super hard to read. I was actually very engaged with it for the first half of it or so. And it just went off the rails and was really dumb. Like I said at the beginning, I thought that this was going to be sort of a Victor Victoria thing. Victor Victoria is basically Julie Andrews, is a woman, and she's playing a man who is playing a woman. And just all sort of hijinks happen, and it's really, really fun. And that's what this could have been. They set it up to be very similar to that. And that's just not what happened. I was so mad because there's so much potential. That's, I think, something I've noticed in at least her earlier books, is that there was a lot of potential, but it wasn't utilized properly. And that's what gets me so mad about so many, well, frustrated more than mad, about so many romance novels and novels in general, where you can see the potential and it just is squandered. It's so bad. So yeah, don't read The Greatest Lover in All England. It's not worth your time. I think the only good thing about this book, The Greatest Lover in All England thing, it is actually kind of funny because Sir Anthony and Sir Danny are kind of just joking, and they're both claiming they're the greatest lover in all England, and they kind of are bickering about it, and that part is slightly amusing, and it's like a couple of sentences here and there. That's about the best thing about this book. And the cover, like I said, the cover is ultimately the best thing. I mean, just the Fabio, look at me. Yeah, don't waste your time on this one. It's one of her older ones. Read some of her newer Regencies. Those are fairly good. She has learned. She didn't stay bad. And this is, again, 25 years old, so they were still kind of figuring out historical romance. They'd had years. Georgette Heyer was back, I think, in the 60s or something. But they were still kind of figuring out the sort of more modern version of it. So I can understand why it may have taken Christina Dodd a little while to get better. But this is not good. Don't read it. So thank you so much for watching this spooky book review. I tried to do zombie-ish makeup. It actually looks way better in the mirror than it does on here. This just looks awful. I had to turn off one of my lights because it just washed me out. And you couldn't even see all the stupid smudges I did. This looks terrible, but oh, whatever. I'm supposed to be a zombie. I don't really care. But yeah, so thank you for watching this. If you want to see what books I'm reading throughout this hashtag 1 year of books, you can check out that hashtag, or you can also check me out on Twitter at author M.E. Kennedy. And just, get random updates about what books I'm reading. I post different things just in my life. It's my personal Twitter account. It's pretty much the only Twitter account I have. I just post random things to it. Could be interesting, could be boring, I don't know, but check me out if you want. Next week, I'm going to be reading Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. It's one of the few spooky books I actually own. I'm slightly cheating. I haven't read the whole book, but I think I read a couple chapters of it years ago. I've completely forgotten. I don't remember anything about the book, but I did remember I started to read it, but I have not actually finished reading it, so I don't, it's only cheating a little, but yeah, so that's what I'm going to be reading for next week. And then I think I have to read one more book, because there's one more Wednesday. There's like 5 Wednesdays in October, so I have to find one more spooky book to read, if I have a spooky book. If not, I'll read a romance novel or something. And then, yeah, so you'll see me dressed up a couple more times. I gotta think of other makeup things I can do, because obviously I'm not very good at it, but we'll see. But yeah, so thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and I will see you later. Bye.